Hello everyone, thanks for checking out the video. Today we have a special guest on Behind the Gloves, Dan Champa. Dan is an awesome individual. I've gotten the pleasure of knowing him over the past few years, and now he is a full-time coach at my gym, and I couldn't be more happy about that. There's really no other way to say it. Dan has a deep passion for Muay Thai, and his coaching abilities and his coaching tactics are awesome. Him being at the gym that I attend now is doing nothing but helping me progress in my Muay Thai, and it's just been awesome. But really, there's no point for me to explain much. Let's just get into our interview with Dan Champa.
My name's Daniel Champa. I've been doing Thai boxing for about 15 to 18 years, so I've been doing it for a while. I've just recently been coaching, competed as an amateur originally. I was 7-3 when I did compete. The way I got into martial arts is through doing Taekwondo. So I originally did Taekwondo, started off with that, loved it, competed a lot when I was younger, and then after that, took some time off, got into music for a little bit, and then eventually found Muay Thai, actually found Judo first, and then found Muay Thai afterwards. And the reason why is because I started Judo, loved it a lot, was going to try to compete in MMA, understood that I needed striking, so I found a local Muay Thai gym that was luckily right down the street. My Muay Thai trainer recommended that I do a Muay Thai fight before I did MMA, because back in the day it wouldn't count towards my combat record. Did the Muay Thai fight, got completely destroyed in the first round, and realized, hey, I should probably work on this full time rather than spread my efforts. And back then it was harder because there was multiple disciplines, but you had to pay for each one. So it wasn't just one rate where everything was under one roof, which obviously eventually happened with the creation of MMA. So I was paying for Judo, and I was paying for Muay Thai, and I figured I'd just focus on one, and then I'd eventually come back to another. And I just loved Muay Thai so much that I stuck with that for the remainder. Do grapple on occasion, usually back then too. These are non-paid jobs, so I would just take grappling, free grappling as an exchange. And that's one way I ended up at Guardian, was the same thing. After I met Matt Skoviak, he saw I had experience, asked me to take on the classes, said, yeah, no problem. And then said, I can't really offer anything except grappling. I said, fine by me. And just spent the summer grappling, doing Muay Thai. Eventually in 2017, I was doing what anyone does, is just working, not having time to train. I eventually got to go to Thailand. Got some money from my grandmother and said, I want you to do the things you want to do. And I said, I'm going to Thailand. And my dad and mother were completely against it. They're like, no, you can't do that. That's too much of a risk, because they're travelers within the United States, but not necessarily international travelers. When I think about it now, when I did it, I was just so excited and passionate about Muay Thai. I didn't care what obstacle to get there. But now being older, it was crazy. I was going to another country, did not know how to speak Thai, was relying on people knowing English, but it was one of the greatest experiences and really reignited my passion for Thai boxing. So I had taken 2 years off prior, got this money, realized man, I'm gonna just do this thing. I'm out of shape, but I need to do this at least once. It might not be the best opportunity for me because I'm not fighting anymore, but I knew for me, I could give the best I can and get whatever experience I can out of it. And it really reignited my passion for it. And then went to go try to compete. Unfortunately got a concussion, and then said, you know what, if I can't compete, I still want to be around it. I'm gonna focus on being a trainer and a coach. Did that for 2 years with one gym, then took some time off after that. And then, now I'm here at Guardian MMA. Always, anytime I would visit in Tennessee, I would come by Guardian, teach some classes, and then Matt would always be like, what about, you think about coming down here? I said, nope, never, sorry, man. Anytime I'm in town, I will always help you, but when it comes to living here, that's never gonna happen. But, things line up. 20 years later, I finally said yes, and now I'm here, and I've been here about 2 weeks, and just super excited to see the potential of where the program's gonna go.
Yes, absolutely, and we're glad I'm speaking for me, I'm glad that you're here, because I not that I don't love my striking program now, it's got me to where I'm at, but you got to change, and you always got to keep up, and one thing is I get very complacent with coming in, doing my own stuff, that's what I like, and it's the number one thing is I try not to do is turn the gym into my home, but I do it regardless, everyone does it, it's So I'll come in and I'll be lazy some days, or I'll do my thing, but it's a slow class, so I'm going to go slow. I don't push myself no more. I get activity, that's what I need. But when you're in a class like this, you can't not. It's like you can't not, and it's like good because it's like I do the Kenny Powers joke where I'm like, I don't want to be the best at exercise. I want to be good at fighting. It's like, but you got to be good at exercising too. And in a place that it will actually make me do the exercising, yeah, it's like I need it because I know that I get the reward also of getting some fighting in there too. So I'll take the exercise to get that. So you say your first martial art was Taekwondo?
Correct.
And then when did you start that? At what age?
I probably started it at 6 years old, so I started very young. I'm adopted, so for my family, they were trying to, let me be aware of my culture. And Taekwondo is a Korean-based martial art, so they thought that was the best fit. Also for me, it's funny, I have other friends who are adopted who are against living up to the stereotype. But for me, I loved Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles back in the day. The Karate Kid was back when I was growing up. Yeah. So to be able to do that was that's all I cared about. I just went every single day. My dad would drive me there, drop me off, and I just loved it. I loved tournaments. I loved doing katas back in the day, and that was my main focus. I then took some time off and did the things you do as a kid, got into like basketball, which ended up being my next thing. So I did step away from it, which I do regret now, but at the time, all your friends playing basketball, you go play basketball. So did that for a while and then tried to revisit it because I was at my red belt, and back at the time, red belt was the one belt before black belt. And I was like, I gotta get my black belt in Taekwondo and then I'll be done with this. And fortunately didn't get to that point. But luckily the base that Taekwondo gave me, which was a blessing and a curse, is I could kick, but not correctly to Muay Thai. So I did have the hip strength and the flexibility from Taekwondo doing it younger. So I could kick when I did start Muay Thai, but I didn't have the proficiency, and it actually makes my style a little more unique because I can kick hard because of those things, but it's not as traditional as a regular Thai boxing kick. It's very close, but if you were to look or feel the difference, it's a little different. So it just has a different feel on it, but it's very similar to the actual Thai style, which took a long time. And like I say, with anything, whatever your base is, sometimes it's very difficult to say, okay, we're not gonna do this anymore. We're gonna completely change this and stop doing that. And I see that as a coach now, because I personally went through it, is like telling someone, hey, you've been doing this wrong the whole time, you should be doing it this way. Takes a while for someone to process and to kind of break those habits, and that muscle memory too, which is one of the hardest things. The one thing I know is that if you've conquered a bad habit is when you're very tired. Because when you are very tired, that habit comes out, you just resort to the things and the things that are built in, and that's where it really exposes that. And that's my point during my classes, is when I make people very tired, that's where I make my best judgment, because that's where you're gonna give the most realist, most honest feedback of your technique, along with your attitude, along with everything else.
Yes, absolutely, and I'll say it works every time. It's like, but with the Taekwondo thing, so did you come up in your Taekwondo, would you say it's like, because just like any martial art, especially things like Taekwondo, karate, in America, you can come across a watered down version. Did you find you a good gym?
Yeah, I believe at the time, Taekwondo, as right now, obviously, with MMA and the growth of MMA, a lot of people don't take the respect for Taekwondo, because back in the day, during that time I was growing up, with Karate Kid and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles being such a big thing in the culture, Taekwondo gyms were coming up left and right, and karate was like #1 because of the media that was backing it up. And even one of my instructors, or part of the lineage, was one of the Ninja Turtles in the costume back in the day.
Oh, nice.
So that's how legit. So I would say I did have a legitimate gym at that time for the art. And also too, like even with the instructor I had at that time, he was, a legit instructor for that art. And what I take from that art is the discipline that it really instills from it. And like I said, a lot of the hip strength and the things I was able to do, obviously with punching and stuff, I was punching correctly. And later had to develop that with boxing and Thai boxing. But I think that for the experience I had, it did what it needed to do, which is that discipline and that belief in self-empowerment, which I use to carry on and try to instill into my students. that was a huge pivotal thing. I believe if I didn't have that Taekwondo and I did my martial arts journey, the discipline might have not came until later, or some other coach trying to instill that. But I already had the discipline, understood what it took. Therefore, when I did any other martial art, I understood it's being humble, being disciplined, consistency, doing it right, not having an ego. All those elements, I definitely believe that I really acquired through Taekwondo.
Yeah, I can see that. That's because all thing, martial arts. There's so many great things about all martial arts, and there's nothing wrong with taekwondo. I mean, there's things wrong with boxing. If you could be the best boxer in the world, you get taken down instantly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, but there's nothing wrong with taekwondo as far as a whole. It's got a lot of great stuff. Do they, for their hands, they don't lean on hands? Do they do that because back in the day, everything was more trained about like real fighting. It wasn't like we're gonna wrap our hands. So hands they can break easy. Was that an idea more about like why they focused on feet and hand in taekwondo? I wouldn't know for sure.
No problem. With taekwondo, mainly it's about point fighting, and that's the difference. So that's the one thing I love, the only combative element. So in tournaments, there are two different things they're judging on for taekwondo. Number one is forms, and the goal of forms was to instill a sequence that if someone were to attack you, that you would do all these different elements to kind of do it. So for example, like when you're reaching over your back or doing a different form thing, it's supposed to be simulating someone attacking you, and you're doing the sequences, which I do like that because it still translates to today with any combination of boxing with jiu-jitsu. It's if I were in the situation, what am I going to do next? But they did it as like a roadmap scripted. But obviously, as we know, fighting is a variable. So yeah, what if they didn't do the thing that you're doing this kata form for over and over again? So you have that, number one, is you get judged on. And then there was a combat aspect in which you would be trying to score points. Now, obviously it was very heavy kick base. I remember as a kid, I'd be wearing headgear and like very, your traditional, like over your knuckles with no wraps to do the point fighting. And, kicks you could just unload back then, and it was easier to get in and out. And maybe that's another reason why I have a good distance gauge because of taekwondo, because the goal is what? Try to score the point and not get pointed back. So you would use your hands for blocking, but think about, even when I talk about in my classes, is what is your longest range weapon? Is your kicks. Therefore, that's why taekwondo is a heavy base of that, because you're trying to touch your opponent without getting touched back. So I would say with that, my hands were not as good. I knew them from katas and from, trying to do the self-defense aspect. But honestly, when it came to the competition aspect, I was mainly just doing kicks. I was doing, your traditional flying taekwondo kicks and all that stuff. And I even remember for one of my tournaments, more of it I think now is a traumatic experience. I went against one of my teammates at one of these tournaments, and I threw like a very similar like crane kick and hit her right in the chest and knocked the wind out of her. And I just remember like you sit, in your stance and kind of look away while they recover, and she was like crying and trying to catch her breath and stuff. And Joe Rogan talks about it too, like the realness of it, the power you're trying to generate of that. I just remember like, oh man, this is like a pretty real thing. I'm glad that didn't happen to me. Yeah. But I loved the combat aspect of it. My parents, I knew there wasn't really boxing gym by us that I'm aware of. Yeah. And when you say martial art, that is a more family friendly than when you say, I want to go box. Because I did love the stuff like Rocky coming up in the day. One of my favorite movies, And when one input I would put for Rocky, it's funny when you watch it as a person who's never done combat sports. You're like, this is awesome, I want to be like Rocky. And then you get that perspective and experience, and you look at the story and you're like, wow, this is kind of really legit, where it's like, you might not be super talented, your trainer doesn't give you the attention, you might just take a random fight, you're working on your basics, and the story itself is so relatable. You see now from a fighter's life, even to the last movie, which everyone's like, the last movie is the best movie. And I'm talking about the original sequence of the 5 before actually Rocky Balboa and stuff after that. But even if that's sometimes how it used to be for former boxers and champions, is now you're going to coaching, now you're trying to figure out real life, you're on TV, you're on every magazine, you have the spotlight, and then the injuries start coming in with CTE and concussions, and all of a sudden now you cannot compete, and now it's like you got to live a normal life, which is a hard adjustment, because when you are a fighter, you're given everything, and like you mentioned before, the gym is your home. You're literally either sleeping and eating at your house and recovering, or you're in the gym trying to put in work and trying to be the best you can be.
Yes, absolutely. And well, that's the great thing about fighting. This is why I love fighting personally, is that because obviously we make a sport out of it, but it's one of the things that it's reality we made a sport out of. Football, you're not going to find that. I love football and all, but you're not going to find it. You're not going to find 5 gorillas on 5 gorillas. They line up, throw a coconut around. It just doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Fighting is a very natural thing. And Dana White said it best when he was talking about how you could have a door to anywhere, any sport thing, but you would watch 2 hobos fighting before. You could be like, this is Super Bowl's in here. You come in for free. You're like, oh, well, hold on, these hobos are fighting.
Yeah.
It transcends language. Everyone understands it. I don't care where you could not even understand there was other humans besides your colony you're in right now. But you could be plopped in the middle of America. Like, what is? I don't understand what this is. I don't understand existence at all. But you see 2 people fighting, and I know what that is. I know what it is. It's great. It's the only sport where they have an allotted amount of time, but that is almost irrelevant because it could be over 2 seconds from now. You know what I mean? Football's never been like that. No one's ever scored a touchdown so bad they're like, stop the game. It's over. You know, it's like, that's why fighting is amazing. And it's what they call a common sport. Is what you were talking about earlier when you said, you know, like, yeah, you might not Rocky, you might not have the most talent, but you win. You ended up winning because you had the heart, you had the drive, whatever it is. That doesn't really translate that in every other sport. A lot of sports, you need to be athletic, you need to be fast, you need to be whatever it is. Fighting is great because what you see people all the time that come up, they're like, I know, like Gordon Ryan's a good example. He's not particularly fast, he's not particularly athletic, flexible, but he's the best combat jiu-jitsu person there is. You know, why? Because it's a fundamental thing. He puts the work in. Yeah, obviously he's on juice, but everyone's on juice at that level. So just juice isn't going to get you all the way there. Just being strong enough is not. It's just going to help, you know. So when it comes to stuff like that, did you experience anything like that in your fighting? Like you said, you fought in Thailand and stuff. Was there a problem with steroids or anything like that?
You know, I didn't get the opportunity to compete in Thailand when I was there. I just mainly did the training. But, you know, there was a lot of stuff that I was informed of that is a thing that does happen potentially, which, you know, I was never aware of because, you know, it's one thing with social media gives the opportunities to see, experience these things, but it's not going to always give you the truth. It's going to give you one aspect of it that you can enjoy, but then when you're actually at the camp and you're seeing the things that might not be, you know, looks are deceiving. Yes. So I did, when I heard about that, some people were informing me of it, of like people that I looked up to in the Thai and like, oh yeah, they juiced. It's like, what? That's crazy. You know, that can't be it. They just train really hard. Nope. You know, and that was hard where it's like you hear about your hero, you're like, oh man, that can't be. But, you know, like you just mentioned, is a real thing. And going back to your comments on like the athleticism, you get a lot of people who are former athletes who come in. But the joy about combat sports, it doesn't matter about athletics. You can be just as good and just as talented from technique. And then when you get to the highest level, athletics sometimes does assist in that thing, but there could be at the lower levels, it could be equal playing field. You know, you could be super athletic but have no technique and overwhelm somebody, or you could have not be athletic but know this technique and use that against them. And that's the beauty of it, is that it is such a sport where it doesn't require you know, constant reps like basketball. You need to be successful with being athletic. If you're not athletic, you will probably struggle immensely. But in the sport of martial arts, it's an even playing field, because maybe you're not the most athletic, maybe you can't run as fast as somebody else. But if you have an arm bar down or you have a technique down and a go-to, it evens the playing field.
Yes.
So
yeah, absolutely. And since we're this topic right now about your fighting, one thing I always like to ask people is, just because it's an intriguing question to me, and it really it just intrigues me when people are ready, like the day of the fight, seconds before, minutes before the fight, whatever, like the hours, I guess, when you get to the venue. Everyone has a little different thing. I listen to Boss Rudin talk, and he says he likes to keep it like fun times, chill, like where like you're about to go out and just have a good time. And like he says, there's always, you know, one guy, a friend, who comes to me, he's like, this guy's gonna take food out. He's like, no, I don't need none of that, just because he knows what he's about to go do.
Yeah.
Some people like to keep serious. Some people, what do you do to, like, before your fight specifically? Like, are you warm up, in the back, chilling, relaxing? What are you doing?
So for me, honestly, the one thing that always got to me was the nerves. I had terrible nerves with it. I remember I was super confident in my first fight, and then I remember warming up in the back and be like, why am I doing this? And I remember too, going in the bathroom, and then you're hearing people throw up, and people are just, that is the most realist thing you're ever going to get, because then you start coming to this realization, like, you know what, honestly, I might not walk out of there. And that is just, it starts running these scenarios through your head. Me personally, I had terrible nerves, and I knew that if I had gotten over the nerves that I could be successful. But then it's being too smart for your own good, which I say, you got to have some ignorance while you're fighting, but also be technical and smart, and there's that hard balance. For me, like I said, I tried to ignore the ignorance and be like, why am I doing this in the first place? And you kind of forget, and you have to remember why you're doing this, why you've chosen to do this, especially as a competition. So I was very unsuccessful in my first competition, you know what I mean? And that's where I got my ego checked and went back to discipline and going back to the Taekwondo nature of, like, you know what I mean? You might be the best today, but it doesn't mean you're always going to be the best. And I really worked off that. Like I said, my first experience was horrible. I got TKO'd in my first round. Overwhelmed, super embarrassed. All my friends were there, and I remember just going to the gym, and all I wanted to do was just kind of redeem myself from that, and just kept training hard, training differently, changing it. And then the next time I competed, I had the same nerves. And I remember one of my best friends that I trained with was there, and he just got in my face and said, are you going to do this or not? You have a choice. If you don't want to do this, fine, don't do this. But if you are going to do this, you got to do it. We're doing it now. And that really changes. Like, yeah, I want to do this. Okay, good. Then we're doing this. Like, you know what I mean? You're letting your mind trail, but if you're going to do this, you're going to do this now. And I was like, yep, you're right. I'm just going to do this. We're here. You know what I mean? I want to do this, therefore I'm going to do it. And, I was terrified in my second fight after being TKO'd and embarrassed. And I didn't tell anyone about the fight because I didn't want all my friends to watch me get TKO'd for a second time. So I played smart, used my footwork, used inside leg kicks, used left kicks. Hurt him a bunch of times in the fight when I watch it now, but it's funny because the goal for me wasn't to win. It was just to go through 3 rounds. I had been embarrassed. I got TKO'd, and at that point I was like, you know what, I just want to go 3 rounds without getting TKO'd. And luckily I won by split decision, which I was even more ecstatic because I didn't expect that, because the goal wasn't like, I'm gonna go back and TKO the next guy. It was just, I just want to get this experience to the fullest, is get in the ring, go through the 3 rounds. If I lose by decision, it's fine, but I gave it my best ability and got the whole experience. Won by split decision, and just remember being just so overwhelmed with joy. I couldn't believe my hands were being raised, and that was what was most important to me, and people were congratulating me. But that's really where it was from there. Had a little confidence, then had a trainer from Thailand fly out. So, I had a little bit of confidence, and that really helped me get some of the nerves. So when I went to my third fight, I thought it was good, but the problem was, once again, ego got the best of me. I'm training with a Thai trainer. I remembered I had gotten in a car accident probably like 2 weeks before the fight, but I was like, man, in Thailand, they probably just fight through everything. But that was not a wise decision. I had a terrible contusion on my chest. I just had a bunch of issues after that, and I remember like the fight started and he kicked me right to the chest, and I just remember the pain, like, man, I just gotta push through it. I trained with a Thai trainer, like, I'm gonna get through this. And once again, got TKO'd in the second round, and just started questioning everything. It was like, okay, cool, I had this awesome redemption arc of my second fight. Then my third fight, it goes back to being TKO'd again. And I just was like, you know what, maybe I'm just not cut out for competition. I love this sport. I'll just continue to train, and if I don't compete, it's fine. I just still love the sport. So, took some time off, and then as we were talking about earlier, prior to this, went to Guardian, started training and coaching and doing jiu-jitsu, got in amazing shape, and then went back to Philadelphia, tried to find the gym that was the best fit for me. So I went to probably like 6 or 7 gyms in Philadelphia, because I grew up in New Jersey, and I lucked out that there was one Muay Thai gym, by the beach in Manahawkin, New Jersey, and there was no other in sight. I remember that was the only one, and I lucked out that I luckily had a guy who trained under another trainer who was Thai, and that's why he was able to bring in that connection. He did Métis Dragon Leg, so he had that style, and Pong Song, who had like a footwork style. So I really lucked out with my first trainer, in that he gave me a good foundation, but I think his one weakness was he didn't understand, because not a lot was going, was like the competition aspect of like cornering. And I learned that later, so when I found my gym in Philadelphia, I was looking for what? authenticity as well as a fight coach if I were to compete again. And luckily I did. And what's crazy about it, I was in the best shape of my life, training for this fight, was actually going to fight on the same promotion that I lost on. So I was like, oh man, here's another awesome redemption arc for myself. Train super hard, cut extra weight, show up at the weigh-ins, and my opponent's 14 pounds over. And the commission says, sorry, we're not going to let the fight go. Like, your fight is canceled. And I just remember being devastated and just like, man, like I just wanted it back. But just have to remember everything happens for a reason. And I think it took 6 years after that. I went through something really hard in my personal life. And I just remember thinking like, okay, you know, I'm at rock bottom. Like, what am I going to do now? And I just remember, you know, Thai boxing. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go back, just go to the gym, have no distractions, just train. And I remember, you know, calling my trainer and be like, hey, you know, I want to set myself for success. I'm in a bad spot. I think the best way for me to do this is to be in the gym. He says, yes, of course. Come to the gym. Trained 6 days a week. I did that, you know, nonstop. Was running 5 miles every single day. And he's like, listen, man, like you are training like you're gonna fight. Why don't you just do it? It's like, listen, I got bad nerves. You know, I just don't think I'm cut out for it. He's like, you are super talented. And I remember like training partners and guys who've been in the gym forever. It's like, you are super talented, dude. If you can get your nerves under control, I think you'd be pretty good. And, you know, I kept training for that. I was like, okay, I'll just take the fight. I'll take a fight and do it. Was waiting to get the fight, had an original opponent. He drops out the day before the fight. And I'm like, I guess I'm just not meant to fight. Luckily, they found a replacement. His teammate wanted to take it. Took the fight, you know, never felt better for a fight. I just felt like everything was finally aligned. I was the first time with my coach in Philadelphia. And same kind of concept I mentioned earlier with my second fight. The point wasn't to win. The point was just to be able to compete again, do the best of my ability, and hopefully everything goes well. So, you know, it's funny because of how that fight ended. I was winning that fight, you know, dropped him in the third with the clenched knees, and then there was 10 seconds left, the coach yelled out, and I was like, you know, I'm just going to throw the Sanchai kick, the cartwheel kick, because it's 10 seconds, it looks good on the judges. Threw it and knocked him out cold, and I couldn't believe it. And it's funny because, like, you got all these people trying, like, shocked about this thing, but for me, it was more about the personal journey as I was rock bottom, you know, didn't know what to do with my life, and then made myself do this one thing and have a good support system and be able to compete, you know? And all that happened in the span of, I think, 3 months. Just 3 months nonstop, just training, and then have this moment. It was so special to me. I didn't care about the medals. I didn't care about the knockout of the night at the time. I didn't care about any of it. All I cared about was, like, for me to be able to go from where I was to now win again and decisively was just like a surreal moment. I just remember just like looking for my dad and being like, give him a big hug and like, we did it. You know what I mean? Like, I was in a bad spot, and to be able to win, and people were like, oh, knockout. I didn't care. I didn't care about the crowd or anything. I just cared about that moment with the people who cared about me, who saw what I came from, was way more rewarding than the actual win. And that's why that's such a special one to me. People always think, oh, it's because you knocked someone on the cartwheel kick. It wasn't that. It was just where I was from before it. And that's the thing people forget, is the things you do as a fighter don't always apply just in competition. It's in life too. And having that mindset that I took from Taekwondo of being disciplined and learning and being humble really helps me throughout my life. And that's what I try to preach as a coach now, because I know that from my experience, this is one way that you can get on the right track when you are struggling through financial, through whatever you're going through. This is one thing I can assure you, with the right people, that's going to make you, you know, get through that time and make you better, and try to influence your friends and family or anybody who is going through a hard time, just showing and leading by example.
Yes, 100%, man. It's difficult, man. You don't. I think what people need to do is, like, you know, it's you know, it's a cliche or whatever. Is like you got to do something that gives you a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have struggle in your life, even if you do something that's gonna show you what a harder struggle is. That way, when you do go through struggles, you're like, oh, this isn't really that bad. I've been in worse spots. I've been, you know, Dan in the corner kicking me. You know, it's like it's not that hard. Maybe I have to work this 2 extra hours. Isn't that bad? Did, you know, stuff like that. And it's just amazing how, like, a simple martial arts story, man. Like, because people go through stuff like this in everyday life, and it's I don't know. I guess it just seems mundane to them, you know, because everything you described can happen in every aspect of life, even if it was your cardio kickboxing or your just Pilates, whatever, you know. It's like it could just help you get through it, And the reason for me personally, I like this type of stuff is it makes you feel a little stronger, being in shape, makes you feel better, but knowing that, if you have to get into a physical altercation, that you'll usually, if it's just straight up, you more than likely can get away, you'll be fine, you can de-escalate, because, hey, I know what fighting is, I don't even need to get angry, it's like, I don't need to freak out. But, and then you want to compete, that's a whole nother level. What you've done is competing it's an insane idea already in fighting. Let's go see if we can hit each other in the face real hard. It's a good idea though, I think, because it helps you figure out, because people look at it as like a brutality thing, and it's like amateur fighting, sure, it can be more just two guys in there breathing heavy trying to kill each other. But when you start paying attention, like what that person actually did, even though it didn't look good, that he actually put a lot of work in to get here, and that meant a lot to him, and maybe from that he'll learn, fighting is more than this, more than that, and then actually do something else with his life. I've seen people come in here, spend a couple years here, and just realize this just helped them realize what life was, and they didn't even need this anymore. They're like, I'm good. I can go back to my regular life. This life is easy. Like, let me just go enjoy that. And that's a beautiful thing about martial arts. And, having a good coach like you to come in here and show us this. And, there's only so much time in a day to come in and talk to people, and, every coach is different. Some people, they want to all right, kick. All right, see you later. It's like, but you come in, you teach technique, you teach passion, you always have something to say at the end of class to just, sum up. I feel like you do this with anyone, is if you see a little hitch, instead of, you'll say something to them, sure, but instead of that, at the end of class, you'll kind of fit it into your speech. I see that a lot, like obviously stuff like, hey, if you're tired, you're gonna deal with that. But even if you deal with I don't say me, I'm not that big a deal, but even me, maybe I've done something, and at the end of the class, you just fit in a little something to maybe I feel like, okay, I learned something from that. I don't know if he was talking to me about me, but it seemed like he was showing me, okay, yeah, let's learn from that. You can't ask for much more from a coach. Obviously, good technique. It's but it goes without saying. But that's, so we get in past that. But the way you come in, the way you coach, it has been amazing. That's why I wanted to do a little video with you, get you to come in and just say some words about this, tell me a little bit about your story. And I thank you for that today. And at the very end, and just if you want to once again plug anything, you want to tell anybody to go other than Guardian, obviously, right? Guardian. But
yeah, no problem. Like I said, just trying to get as many as I people I can for Guardian Mixed Martial Arts. So pretty much the only shout out I have at this point. And just being a shout out to all the people that have been involved in my life or part of my journey. And that's the key that you can't forget. It's like, I am thankful I'm here today and have these blessings, and just thanking any past trainers, any training partners, even students, because sometimes when I question, what I am doing, sometimes you have students that give you great feedback and are really appreciative, and you kind of forget the mission. And my thing is, I'm not looking for the accolades or the praises or the rewards. I'm just trying to get the job to the best of my ability. But it is always still good when someone says, thank you for class, or you hear the stories, because it's more about the person than it is about the job. The job here is I'm trying to give you technique and get you in shape, or maybe for a competition. But at the end of the day, it's how people are able to internalize it. So mainly it's just a thanks to any of those people along the way, because if I had no one believing in me, I would have to rely on myself and kind of push forward and question. But when you get some of those affirmations during the journey that you're doing, I remember even when I started coaching, and I've told the story a bunch of times. When you go in as a new coach, sometimes it's difficult. Some people favor the other coach. I started from a class of 40 with the old coach to my first day having 3 students. And by the end, I had about 50 students at the end, stayed persistent, believed in those 3 students who believed in me, and that's really the key. So mainly a shout out to Guardian Mixed Martial Arts, and just trying to see, if this is a great fit for you. And that's another thing too. Maybe my style isn't. I just want people to find what's best for them and what caters to them the best, and maybe this place isn't. But I would just encourage to give it a chance, see how it is, and maybe it might be something that you stick with long term. So mainly just a thanks to the people in the past, a thanks to Guardian Mixed Martial Arts for giving me this opportunity, and a thanks to you for taking the time to have an interest in my backstory. Like I said, I'm not doing this for any accolades. I just do it for the joy of it, and just thankful for these opportunities.
All right, there we go. I hope you guys really enjoyed my interview with Dan. I got to sit down. I got a brief time, like just like anyone, we're pressed for time. We don't have all day. So I got a very short interview with Dan. And just in that small window, I got to learn a lot about him that I didn't know. And just where we all can connect on these type of things. Like he mentioned his passion of, martial arts starting at a young age. And of course they start just like all of us sometimes with just a cartoon, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was one of the things that got him going. Me, very similar. I was a big Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan when I was a kid. Power Rangers. I mean, just all these different types of martial arts. And of course, my biggest influence when I was a kid was Mike Tyson. I used to watch him and demand that, my parents, get the pay-per-view so we could watch it. And of course, originally they didn't want to do that, but, if you complain enough and you have the right parents, you can get through to a lot. But of course, that doesn't matter. We're here to talk about Dan. This interview with Dan was amazing. I just got to know so many great things about him, and we're going to be doing more interviews with him, just getting to know, because he's got a full story to tell. There's way more to it than just this. This is just kind of the beginning. This is the aperitif, if you will, beginning to Dan Champa. He's going to be included into also anything I can get him in, because he's an expert in his field, and when it comes to Muay Thai and striking, the man knows what he's talking about. So, of course, we got to sit down and talk with this guy more and more, and let Dan be a lesson to everyone. If you see this video and watch the interview, it doesn't matter if you're involved in martial arts, striking, Muay Thai, it doesn't matter. Let him be just an example to you of how when someone wants something and they do it and they pursue it, how far they can go. And it's important that you do these things in life. I understand if you have things that stop you. We all have things that stop us, disabilities, family, so forth, wife, girlfriend, kids, all these things. But if you can follow your passions, it's just the way to go. We live in a world where we can do that, and we need to do it if we get the ability. And look no further than someone like Dan Champa to show you how that's done. Is anyone perfect? No, of course not. No one's perfect. But when you dedicate your life to something and you come in every day, no matter how hard it is, and you love it, and you just keep doing it, nothing more can be commendable. There can be nothing more commendable about that. And thanks to Dan again for his time. Look forward to learning more and more. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Dan Champa, and more to come. More to come with Behind the Gloves, as always. We're also going to be, sooner or later, we're going to be getting into talking with police officers about martial arts and different stuff like that. That's kind of another interview lane I'm going to be getting into. It's not Behind the Gloves. It's a little different, but things like that are coming. Thank you guys for watching the video, supporting the channels. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. Please comment. I want to know what you thought about the interview. I want to know what you think about anything. Anything you guys want to talk about, leave in the comments. Thanks a lot, guys.